Dr. Hansel Park stared at his computer screen, his eyes wide with disbelief. The data from Venus showed something impossible. He had checked the numbers 20 times already, but they remained the same. The radiation patterns in Venus's upper atmosphere did not make any sense. He reached for his coffee cup, only to find it empty. It was 3 a.m. at the Korean Space Research Institute, and he was the only one still working. The cleaning staff had left hours ago, leaving him alone with his strange discovery. "This can't be natural," he whispered to himself. The pattern showed signs of deliberate manipulation. It was as if someone had changed Venus's atmosphere on purpose, millions of years ago. Hansel picked up his phone and called his colleague, Dr. Ji-woo Kim. He knew she would be angry about the late call, but this was too important to wait until morning. "Do you know what time it is?" Ji-woo's sleepy voice answered after several rings. "I found something on Venus," Hansel said quickly. "The radiation patterns, they're artificial. Someone changed the planet's atmosphere deliberately." There was a long silence on the other end. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Ji-woo finally said. When Ji-woo arrived at the lab, her hair was messy, and she wore a wrinkled coat over her pajamas. But her eyes were sharp as she looked at Hansel's computer screen. "Show me everything," she said, pulling up a chair. Hansel explained his findings. The radiation patterns formed regular shapes that appeared every few hundred kilometers in the upper atmosphere. Nature didn't make patterns like that. More importantly, these patterns matched certain mathematical sequences that only appeared in artificial structures. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a graph. "These peaks appear at regular intervals. Each one is exactly 314 kilometers apart. That's not natural. Someone put these here." Ji-woo leaned closer to the screen. "When are these patterns from?" "That's the really interesting part," Hansel said. He pulled up another screen full of numbers. "Based on the decay rates and atmospheric composition, these patterns are at least 2 million years old." Ji-woo sat back in her chair, her face pale. 2 million years? That's impossible. Humans weren't even close to existing then. "Exactly," Hansel said. "Someone else did this. Someone changed Venus's atmosphere 2 million years ago, and they left these patterns as evidence." They spent the next few hours analyzing the data. As the sun rose outside their window, they became more certain. The patterns were real. They were artificial. And they changed everything humans thought they knew about Venus. By morning, Hansel and Ji-woo had prepared a report for the Institute's director. They knew their discovery would cause a huge debate in the scientific community. Some would say they were wrong. Others would want to start a mission to Venus right away. "What do you think we'll find if we go there?" Ji-woo asked as they waited for the director to arrive. Hansel looked out the window at the morning sky, somewhere behind which Venus was hiding. "I think we'll find out why someone wanted to make Venus uninhabitable, and maybe more importantly, what they were trying to keep inside." The director arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. As Hansel began to explain their discovery, he noticed his hands were shaking. He knew that after today, everything would change. Humanity had just found proof that they weren't alone in the universe, and whatever had happened on Venus 2 million years ago was just the beginning of a much bigger story. The truth about Venus was waiting to be discovered, and Hansel Park had just taken the first step toward finding it. 2 weeks after their discovery about Venus, Dr. Ji-woo Kim found herself in an underground facility on Mars. The cold, red walls surrounded her as she studied strange markings on an ancient computer screen. Her team had found this place 3 months ago, but today was different. Today, they had finally turned on the power. "The symbols are changing," she said into her recorder. The alien text flowed across the screen like water. Most of it made no sense, but some patterns were starting to look familiar. Her assistant, young Ho-baek, worked at another computer nearby. He was young and eager, fresh from university. "Dr. Kim, I think I found something about Venus," he called out suddenly. Ji-woo walked over to his screen. The ancient text showed pictures of a planet that looked like Earth. But it wasn't Earth. It was Venus from 2 million years ago. Look at these numbers. Young Ho pointed at some figures. If I'm reading this right, Venus had oceans. It had blue skies. It was like Earth. Jiwoo's hands shook as she took pictures of the screen. Can you find anything about who lived there? Young Ho typed on his keyboard. More text appeared. There's something here about the Guardians of Dawn. I think that's what it says. They were the ones who lived on Venus. Jiwoo called Han-Sol Park back on Earth right away. When his face appeared on her tablet, she could see he hadn't slept much. Han-Sol, we found proof, she said. Venus was like Earth once. And there were people living there. They called themselves the Guardians of Dawn. Han-Sol's tired face lit up. How long ago? The dates match your radiation patterns, about 2 million years ago. Jiwoo turned her tablet to show him the ancient screens. But Han-Sol, that's not all. These records, they talk about something else. Something about why they had to change Venus. She spent the next hour translating more text with Young Ho's help. The story they found was stranger than anything they had expected. The records showed that Venus had been beautiful once. It had blue oceans, green plants, and white clouds. The Guardians of Dawn had built great cities there. They had technology humans could barely understand. But then something went wrong. The records became unclear after that. There were warnings written in red symbols. The word containment appeared many times. They did this on purpose. Jiwoo told Han-Sol. They made Venus hot and poisonous for a reason. They were trying to keep something inside. Inside what? Han-Sol asked. We don't know yet, but look at this. Jiwoo showed him another screen. They built huge machines to change the planet's atmosphere. The same machines that are making your radiation patterns. Young Ho called out again. Dr. Kim, I found coordinates. They point to a place on Venus's surface. Jiwoo looked at Han-Sol through the tablet. They both knew what this meant. Someone would have to go to Venus. Someone would have to find out what the Guardians of Dawn were trying to contain. I'll tell the director, Han-Sol said. We need to organize an expedition. After they ended the call, Jiwoo looked around the dark Martian facility. Somewhere in these ancient computers was the full story of what happened on Venus. She hoped they could find it before they went there. Because if the Guardians of Dawn had destroyed their own beautiful world to contain something, that something must have been very dangerous indeed. Dr. Tae-Young Lee stood in front of the spacecraft that would take his team to Venus. The ship was special. Its hull was covered in new heat-resistant material that could withstand Venus's extreme temperatures. They called the ship Morning Star. Final systems check complete, said Soo-Bin Cho, their pilot. She was the best pilot in the Korean space program, and they would need her skills for this mission. Tae-Young watched his team prepare for launch. Each person was chosen carefully for this mission. Besides Soo-Bin, there was Min-Ah Choi, their geology expert, and Sung Min Kang, who knew about ancient buildings and technology. They also had Young Ho Budik, who had helped find the Mars records. The Americans are angry again, Soo-Bin told Tae-Young quietly. They say we should wait and make this an international mission. Tae-Young shook his head. We can't wait. The radiation patterns are getting weaker. Whatever is down there, we need to find it now. The launch was scheduled for early morning. As the team put on their special cooling suits, Han-Sol Park and Jiwoo Kim came to say goodbye. They would guide the mission from Earth. Remember the coordinates from the Mars records, Jiwoo said. And be careful. We still don't know what the Guardians were trying to contain. The team entered the Morning Star. As they strapped into their seats, Tae-Young thought about everything that had brought them here. Just 1 month ago, they had discovered that aliens had changed Venus on purpose. Now they were going to find out why. Launch sequence starting, Soo-Bin announced. Her voice was calm, but her hands moved quickly over the controls. The morning star lifted off smoothly. As they left Earth's atmosphere, Tai-young looked at his team. Minna was checking her geological equipment. Sung-min was reviewing the Mars records one more time. Young-ho was monitoring the ship's new heat shields. 3 days to Venus, Soo-bin said. Then we'll see if these new shields really work. The journey to Venus was quiet. They spent most of their time preparing their equipment and studying the Mars records. Young-ho found more translations, but they only made the mystery deeper. The records keep talking about something that spreads, he told them during their daily meeting. They say it started small but grew quickly. That's why they had to contain it. On the 3rd day, Venus filled their window. The planet looked beautiful from far away, covered in swirling clouds. But they all knew that under those clouds was the hottest, most poisonous place in the solar system. Beginning descent, Soo-bin announced, "Heat shields at maximum power." As they entered Venus's atmosphere, the ship began to shake. Warning lights flashed as the temperature outside rose higher and higher. The new shields glowed bright red. "Shield temperature approaching critical levels," Young-ho reported. His voice was tense. "Hold on," Soo-bin said through gritted teeth. She guided the ship carefully through the thick atmosphere. Finally, they broke through the clouded layer. Through the windows, they saw Venus's surface for the first time in human history. The ground was cracked and broken, glowing with heat. "There," Sung-min pointed. "Those aren't natural formations." In the distance, they could see huge structures rising from the ground. They were half buried in rock, but their smooth surfaces and regular shapes showed they were built by intelligent beings. "The coordinates match," Young-ho said. "That's where the Guardians built their containment system." Tai-young looked at the ancient buildings. Somewhere in there was the answer to why Venus had been transformed. But as they flew closer, he wondered if some answers were better left unknown. The morning star landed near the ancient buildings on Venus's surface. The ground shook as the landing gear touched down. Through the thick windows, the team could see rivers of molten rock flowing in the distance. Dr. Minna Choi checked her instruments. "Surface temperature is 460 degrees Celsius. Our cooling suits will only last 4 hours." Tai-young looked at his team. "We go in pairs. Soo-bin stays with the ship. Minna. And I will check the main building. Sung-min and Young-ho will examine the outer structures." They put on their cooling suits and checked each other's seals carefully. One small leak would mean death in Venus's harsh environment. The suits were white and thick, with special cooling systems that ran through them like veins. When they stepped onto Venus's surface, the heat hit them even through their suits. The ground was black rock that glowed red in places. The sky was a dark orange, and the air was so thick it looked like water. "Look at these buildings," Minna said as they walked. "They're made of some kind of metal we don't know. It hasn't melted even after millions of years in this heat." They approached the largest structure. It was like a pyramid, but with smooth sides that reflected the orange light. Near the bottom, they found an entrance. "The doors still work," Minna said in surprise as the ancient metal slid open when they approached. Cool air rushed out. Inside, their lights showed long hallways made of the same strange metal. Everything was covered in dust, but nothing had decayed. The Guardians of Dawn had built things to last. "Dr. Lee," Sung-min's voice came through their radio. "We found something in the outer building. It's some kind of machine. It's huge." Tai-young and Minna hurried back outside. In the second building, Sung-min and Young-ho stood before a massive device. It reached up into the dark orange sky, disappearing into the clouds. "It's an atmospheric processor," Young-ho said, examining the ancient control panels. "The Guardians used these to change Venus's atmosphere. But look, they were destroyed on purpose." Minna studied the machine with her instruments. "These processors are still working, even though they're damaged. They're what's keeping Venus hot and poisonous." "But why?" Sung-min asked. "Why destroy their own world?" Suddenly, their suit alarms started beeping. "Temperature rising. Subin's voice came through the radio. The shields on the ship are failing. We have less than an hour left. They rushed to gather as much data as they could. Minna took samples of the strange metal. Young Ho copied information from the control panels. Some men photographed everything. As they hurried back to the ship, Tai Young saw something carved into the wall near the entrance. It was a message, written in the same language they had found on Mars. Young Ho, he called. Quick, what does this say? Young Ho scanned the message with his device. His face went pale inside his helmet. It says, the price of containment is our world. The price of failure is all worlds. They barely made it back to the Morning Star before their suits began to fail. As they lifted off from Venus's surface, Tai Young looked down at the ancient buildings. The Guardians had turned their paradise into a prison. Now they knew why. But the real question was, what were they trying to keep locked away? Back on Earth, Sung Min Kang sat in his laboratory, studying the small piece of crystal they had brought back from Venus. It was part of the processor's control panel, and it contained the Guardian's memory banks. The crystal glowed with a soft blue light as he connected it to his computer. The translation program is ready, Young Ho said from his desk nearby. They had spent 2 weeks improving the program based on what they had learned on Mars. Some men inserted the crystal into a special reader. Ancient symbols appeared on his screen, but these were different from the ones on Mars. They moved and changed, forming patterns that told a story. I think these are personal records, Sung Min said as he watched. Messages from the Guardians themselves. The first message came from someone called the Chief Scientist. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. Today we lost another city. The spread is faster now. Our barriers cannot hold it back. We have only one choice left. More messages followed. Each one told part of the story of Venus's last days. The Guardians had been the most advanced civilization in the solar system. They had built beautiful cities and explored the stars. But then they had discovered something they should not have found. Young Ho, Sung Min called. Look at this part. They found something in deep space, some kind of energy or consciousness. They thought they could study it safely. Young Ho came over to look. The next message showed their mistake. The energy they found could think. It could grow. Worst of all, it could take over other minds and make them part of itself. It's like a virus for consciousness, Young Ho said quietly. A mind that infects other minds. The messages became more desperate. The entity had escaped the Guardians' laboratories. It spread from person to person, city to city. Those it took over became part of its growing consciousness. The Guardians fought back, but they could not stop it. Some men called Dr. Lee and the others to see what they had found. As the team gathered around his computer, the final messages played. We have failed to destroy it, the last chief scientist wrote. It is too strong now, too deeply rooted in our world. Our only hope is to contain it. We will transform Venus itself into a prison. The heat will slow its spread. The poison clouds will keep it isolated. Our civilization will end, but the entity will be trapped. The message continued. To anyone who finds this warning, do not try to make Venus habitable again. Do not try to restore our world. The entity still lives beneath the surface, waiting. If Venus becomes cool enough, if the air becomes clean enough, it will spread again. And this time, it will not stop at one planet. The laboratory was silent when the message ended. They all understood what it meant. The Guardians had sacrificed their entire civilization to save the rest of the galaxy. They had turned their beautiful world into a hell to keep something worse locked away. We have to tell everyone, Dr. Lee said finally. All the space agencies, all the governments. No one can try to terraform Venus. Not now, not ever. Some men looked at the glowing crystal. Somewhere beneath Venus's burning surface, an ancient evil was still alive, still waiting. The Guardians had given up everything to keep it contained. Now that duty had passed to humanity. 1 month after finding the warning message, Dr. Hansol Park made another discovery in the Venus data. He found it late at night while reviewing the radiation patterns again. This time, he saw something new in them, a pattern that looked like brain waves. He immediately called a meeting with the team. They gathered in the main conference room at the Korean Space Research Institute. The room was quiet as Hansol showed them his findings. These patterns don't just keep Venus hot, he explained, pointing to his screen. They're also containing something else, something that thinks. Dr. Ji-woo Kim leaned forward in her chair. The entity the Guardians mentioned. You can detect it. Hansol nodded. It's there, still alive after 2 million years. And it's massive. Its consciousness spans almost half the planet. Sung Nin Kang opened his computer and showed them more translated messages from the crystal memory banks. I found something about how it started, he said. The Guardians were trying to make their minds more powerful. They wanted to transfer consciousness between bodies. Like downloading a mind into a new body, Yum-ho asked. Yes, Sung Min said, but something went wrong. One of the transferred minds started copying itself. It could move between bodies without any equipment. It could take over other minds just by being near them. Dr. Minna Choi, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. So the entity isn't just one consciousness. It's millions of minds, all joined together, and all controlled by the first one that broke free, Hansol added. The Guardians couldn't stop it from spreading, so they had to contain it. They turned Venus into a prison that would last millions of years. Tae-young Lee stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting, and Venus would soon be visible in the evening sky. The Guardians knew that someday, someone would find their world and want to fix it. That's why they left us the warning. But that's not all, Hansol said. He changed the image on his screen. The containment is weakening. The radiation patterns are breaking down. In about 100 years, they'll fail completely. The room went silent again. They all understood what that meant. If the containment failed, the entity would be free. It would find a way off Venus, and humanity wasn't nearly as advanced as the Guardians had been. We have two choices, Tae-young said finally. We can try to fix the containment system, which means sending more missions to Venus, or we can find a way to destroy the entity completely. The Guardians couldn't destroy it. Ji-woo reminded him. What makes you think we can? Because we have something they didn't, Hansol said. We have their research, we have their warnings, and most importantly, we have time to prepare. They worked late into the night, making plans. The entity that destroyed the Guardians was still alive, waiting in its prison of heat and poison. But now humanity knew the truth. The real question was, what would they do with this knowledge? Dr. Young-soo Ba studied the newest data from Venus with growing concern. The readings from the atmospheric processors were getting worse every day. The containment system wasn't just failing, it was failing faster than they had predicted. The patterns are breaking down at double the speed we thought. He told the team during their emergency meeting. We don't have 100 years. We might not even have 50. The conference room at the Korean Space Research Institute was full. Scientists from around the world had come after hearing about the crisis. Some joined through video calls, their worried faces filling screens on the wall. Dr. Hansol Park stepped up to present their options. We have studied the Guardian's technology. We think we can repair the atmospheric processors. But to do this, we would need to land on Venus again. And this time, we would need to stay much longer. How long? Someone asked. At least 2 weeks, Hansol replied. We would need to rebuild parts of the processors, but our best cooling technology only lasts for 4 hours on the surface. Dr. Minna Choi spoke next. She had been working on a solution. We found a way to use the Guardian's metal to make new shields. They could last for 3 weeks in Venus's heat. But there's a problem. She showed them a diagram of the atmospheric processors. To repair them, we have to partly shut them down. When we do this, the temperature around them will drop. Not much, but maybe enough for the entity to become active. The room erupted in argument. Some scientists said they had to try the repairs. Others said it was too dangerous. The entity had destroyed an entire civilization more advanced than humanity. If it escaped, Earth might be next. "There's something else," Young Su said quietly. Everyone stopped talking to listen. "The entity is changing. The breakdown in containment isn't just letting heat out. It's letting the entity's consciousness expand." He showed them new brain wave patterns from Venus. The entity's thoughts were getting stronger. Its consciousness was spreading further across the planet. "It's learning," Dr. Ji-Woo Kim realized. "It's adapting to the containment. That's why the system is failing faster than we expected." Tae-Young Lee stood up. He had led the first mission to Venus, and now he made another difficult decision. "We have to try the repairs," he said. "If we do nothing, the containment will fail anyway. At least this way we have a chance." "And if we fail?" someone asked. "If the entity escapes while we're trying to fix the processors?" Tae-Young looked at the pictures of Venus on the wall, the beautiful planet that had become a prison. The paradise the Guardians had sacrificed to save everyone else. "Then we do what the Guardians did," he said. "Whatever it takes to keep the entity contained, whatever the cost." The room was silent as everyone understood what he meant. They might have to make Venus even more inhospitable. They might have to destroy what was left of the Guardians' world completely. 6 months after the crisis meeting, Dr. Han-Sol Park stood before the United Nations Space Council in New York. Representatives from every space agency on Earth had gathered to hear his team's final report and make a decision about Venus. "The containment system continues to fail," he told them. "We have completed the designs for a new mission to repair the atmospheric processors, but we need all nations to work together. No single country can do this alone." The room was tense. Everyone had read the reports about the entity. Everyone knew the risks. If they did nothing, the containment would fail in less than 50 years. If they tried to fix it and failed, the entity might escape much sooner. Dr. Ji-Woo Kim presented the next part. "We have built new cooling suits using the Guardian's metal. We have designed tools that can work in Venus's heat. The mission would take 3 weeks. We would need to land 3 ships at different processors around the planet." She showed them the plan on large screens. 30 people would go to Venus, 10 to each processor. They would work in teams, rebuilding the ancient machines that kept the entity trapped. "But there is something else you need to know," Han-Sol said. He paused, looking at his notes. "This was the hardest part. We found more of the Guardians' records. Venus was not their only world." The room went completely quiet. Han-Sol continued. "They had colonies on other planets in other solar systems. And on some of those worlds, we found signs of similar containment systems." He showed them pictures from space telescopes. Distant planets that were too hot, too poisonous, too strange. Worlds that might also be prisons. "The entity they found wasn't unique," Ji-Woo explained. "There are other things out there that are similar. The Guardians found several of them. Each time, they had to contain them the same way, by destroying paradise to create a prison." The council members whispered among themselves. Humanity had thought they were alone in the universe. Now they knew the truth. Not only had there been other civilizations, but those civilizations had fought battles against things humans could barely understand. Dr. Tae-Young Lee stepped forward to give the final part of the report. "We have a choice to make," he said. "We can try to fix the containment system, or we can make Venus even more inhospitable. Either way, we become part of this story. We take on the responsibility that the Guardians carried." Young Su-Ba, who had been monitoring Venus throughout the meeting, suddenly stood up. "Dr. Park," he called out, "the latest readings. You need to see this." Han-Sol looked at the data on his tablet. In the last hour, the containment system's failure had accelerated again, and deep beneath Venus's surface, the entity's brain waves were getting stronger. The choice would have to be made soon. Humanity would have to decide. Try to save what remained of the Guardian's world, or destroy it completely to keep the entity trapped forever. As Hansel looked around the room, he realized this was just the beginning. Somewhere out there were other worlds like Venus, other prisons, other entities waiting to escape. The Guardians had passed their duty to humanity. Now humanity had to prove they were ready for it.